My name is Margaret. I'm 72 years old, and this is the story of how my own daughter and her husband laughed while abandoning me in a nursing home, not realizing I was the sole heir to a $1 million fortune. I still remember that day like it happened yesterday. The rain was falling in slow, cold drops as I stood on the porch of my old house, clutching a single suitcase. My daughter Claire and her husband Daniel stood near the car. They looked impatient, like they couldn't wait to get rid of me. "Mom, we've talked about this," Claire said, her tone sharp but rehearsed. "You'll be better off at the nursing home. You'll have people your age around you, good food, care, everything." I smiled weakly. "But sweetheart, I can take care of myself. I've lived in this house for 40 years. Daniel interrupted, sighing dramatically. "Mrs. Latham, you almost fell last week. Claire can't keep rushing over every time you slip. You need supervision." Their words stung, not because they were untrue, but because I could hear the lack of care behind them. They weren't worried about me. They were tired of me. I turned to Claire. "You know your father built this home with his hands. Every corner has a memory. Are you sure?" She rolled her eyes. "Mom, please. Don't make this harder than it already is." I swallowed the lump in my throat and nodded slowly. The driver opened the door to the nursing home van. As I stepped inside, I turned back one last time. Claire was scrolling on her phone. Daniel smirked and said under his breath, "Good riddance." When the van door closed, I caught the faintest sound, Claire laughing. "Don't ever call us," she said through the rain-spotted window. "Just enjoy your new home." The van drove off. I watched through blurry eyes as the house I'd loved for decades faded from view. That was the moment I realized they hadn't just sent me away. They had erased me from their lives. The nursing home smelled of disinfectant and loneliness. The nurse who checked me in smiled kindly, but her eyes were tired, like she'd seen too many forgotten souls before me. As I lay in the small bed that night, I stared at the ceiling and whispered, "You'll regret this one day, Claire." "You'll see," because little did she know. The fortune my late husband had left wasn't hers to touch. It was mine. And the person she had thrown away was the one holding the key to everything she ever wanted. And one day soon, she'd learn that lesson, in a way she'd never forget. The first few weeks in the nursing home were the hardest days of my life. I had gone from a cozy house full of memories to a sterile room with white walls and a single picture of daisies that someone thought would make the place feel cheerful. It didn't. I tried to keep myself busy, reading, knitting, even joining the morning exercise classes. But every night, the loneliness sank in like a cold fog. I used to dream that Claire would call just once to ask if I was okay. But the phone on my bedside table never rang. The other residents were kind. There was Evelyn, who loved gossip and always had candy in her pocket. And George, a quiet man who had been an architect. They made the days bearable, but nothing filled the hole my daughter had left. One evening, as I sat by the window watching the sunset, the head nurse Angela came in. She was in her 50s, stern but kind-hearted. "Mrs. Latham," she said, "there's a gentleman here to see you." My heart skipped. For a moment I thought, could it be Claire? But when the man walked in, it wasn't her. It was a face I hadn't seen in years. "Ms. Margaret Latham," he said with a warm smile. "I'm Thomas Reed, your late husband's attorney." I blinked in surprise. "Thomas? I thought you retired." "I did," he said, pulling up a chair. "But before your husband passed, he asked me to handle something personally for you. Something I never had the chance to deliver." He handed me a small sealed envelope. The handwriting on it made my hands tremble. It was unmistakable, my husband's. I carefully opened it. Inside was a short note and a key. "My dearest Margaret," it read, "if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. You've always been my heart and my home. What I leave behind is not for Claire yet. It's for you. The key belongs to a safe deposit box at First National Bank. Inside, you'll find the truth and what's rightfully yours." Tears welled in my eyes. I looked up at Thomas. "What's in the box?" He smiled softly. "Only you can open it. But I'll tell you this, your husband was a wise man. He wanted to make sure love, not greed, guided the future of his family." As he left, I sat staring at that small silver key, my heart pounding. My husband had hidden something, not from the world, but from our daughter. For the first time in weeks, I felt a spark of life. I wasn't just an old, forgotten woman. I was holding a secret worth more than any apology Claire could ever give. And as I clutched that key close to my chest, I whispered to myself, let's see how long it takes before they realize what they've lost. Because one thing was certain, karma was already on its way. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. The little silver key rested on the nightstand beside my glasses, glinting in the faint morning light. I hadn't slept much, my mind racing through questions. What did my husband mean by the truth? What could be hidden in that box that was worth keeping from our daughter? I dressed early and asked Nurse Angela if someone could take me to First National Bank. She raised an eyebrow. Bank visit? That's unusual, she said, smiling. Big business deal? I chuckled softly. Something like that. A volunteer driver dropped me at the bank. As I walked through the doors, the familiar smell of polished wood and paper flooded me with memories. The very same bank where my husband had handled all our finances. The manager, Mr. Collins, recognized my name immediately. Ah, Mrs. Latham, of course. We've been expecting you. Expecting me? My pulse quickened. He guided me to a private room and placed a large metal box on the table. This is yours, he said, stepping out politely to give me privacy. With trembling hands, I inserted the key. The lock clicked open with a soft snap. Inside was an envelope, a small black notebook, and a velvet pouch. I opened the envelope first. It was a letter, again in my husband's handwriting. My dearest Margaret, it began, by now you know our daughter's true nature. I love her, but she has changed, consumed by greed and pride. I couldn't let her destroy what we built. Inside this box is the account, information for the inheritance, $1 million in assets and investments. It all belongs to you. Use it wisely. When the time is right, the truth will reveal itself. Love, Richard. My hands shook as I opened the black notebook. Every page was filled with neat handwriting, records, account numbers, investments, proof that my husband had planned this carefully. Then I untied the velvet pouch. Inside, there was an old gold wedding band and a flash drive. A note beneath it read, "Play this only when you're ready." I stared at the items for a long time, feeling my chest tighten with emotion. Richard hadn't just left me money, he'd left me a legacy, and perhaps a warning. When I returned to the nursing home that afternoon, something inside me had shifted. I wasn't the weak, abandoned woman Claire thought I was. I was in control, and for the first time in years, I had power. That night, I plugged the flash drive into one of the home's computers. A video opened, grainy but clear. It was Richard, my husband, sitting in his study, speaking directly to me. Margaret, he said softly, if you're watching this, it means our daughter failed my test. I wanted to see if her heart was ruled by love or greed. Now we both know the answer. My breath caught in my throat. He leaned closer to the camera. Don't worry, my love. Everything is in your hands now, and one day she'll realize what she's lost. But by then, it will be too late. I covered my mouth, tears spilling down my cheeks. My husband had known everything, and my daughter had just failed the final test. That night, after watching the video, I couldn't sleep. Richard's words echoed in my mind. She'll realize what she's lost. But by then, it will be too late. I stared out the window of my small nursing home room, the moonlight spilling across the floor. For the first time in months, I didn't feel weak or forgotten. I felt powerful. The next morning, I sat quietly at breakfast, pretending to read the newspaper. But my thoughts were elsewhere. I knew exactly what I had to do. Claire and her husband had left me to rot here, thinking they'd taken everything. They had no idea that the real fortune and the truth was mine to control. I asked Nurse Angela to help me set up a small laptop in my room. Just for reading and writing, I said with a polite smile. But once I was alone, I began moving. I contacted Mr. Collins at the bank through email, transferring the assets into a private trust, one that only I could access. I made sure nothing led back to Claire. Then I hired a lawyer, quietly, discreetly. His name was Thomas Reed, young, sharp, and curious. When he arrived, I explained everything. The will, the test, the betrayal. He listened carefully, taking notes, his expression a mix of shock and admiration. Mrs. Latham, he said finally, you realize you're sitting on a small empire. You could do anything you want with this money. I smiled faintly. Yes, Mr. Reed, and I intend to. Over the next few weeks, I began making small changes. I funded a scholarship in my husband's name. I donated to the nursing home, new beds, books, and medical supplies. The staff began treating me differently, not as a forgotten old woman, but as someone respected, even admired. But the sweetest moment came unexpectedly. One morning, while sipping tea in the common room, I overheard the staff talking. "Did you hear?" one of them whispered. "Claire and Mark, Mrs. Latham's daughter and son-in-law, they're in trouble. Lost their business. Something about unpaid loans." I froze mid-sip. My hands trembled slightly, not out of fear, but satisfaction. The truth had begun its work. Later that evening, my phone buzzed. I hadn't heard that sound in weeks. When I looked at the screen, I couldn't believe it. Claire. For a moment, I considered ignoring it. But then curiosity won. I pressed answer. "Mom?" Her voice was shaky. I don't know how to say this. "Mark's company went bankrupt. We're losing the house. We need help." I closed my eyes, a bitter smile tugging at my lips. "Claire," I said softly, "I thought you never wanted to call me again." There was silence. I could almost hear her breathing. "I was wrong," she whispered. "Please, can we talk?" I took a deep breath. "Of course, dear," I said calmly. "Come visit me tomorrow. We'll talk then." When the call ended, I felt a strange calmness wash over me. Tomorrow she would walk through those nursing home doors thinking she was coming to beg for help, but she had no idea what awaited her. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. For the first time in a long time, I cared about my reflection. I brushed my silver hair neatly, wore a soft blue cardigan Richard had once bought me, and even dabbed on a little perfume. Something Claire used to love when she was a child. As I sat by the window waiting, I could feel my heartbeat rise with every tick of the clock. I wasn't nervous, not anymore. I was ready. Around noon, a sleek black car pulled up outside the nursing home gates. Even from the window, I recognized Claire's tall figure and Mark's ever-confident walk. Except this time, their confidence looked forced, like masks cracking under pressure. When they entered the room, there was a strange silence. Claire looked older, tired, and defeated. Mark's smile was fake, his eyes scanning the room, perhaps searching for signs of money, hope, or both. "Mom," Claire said softly, "you look good." "Do I?" I smiled politely. "That's rare praise coming from someone who left me here." Her face fell, guilt flickering for a moment. "I know what we did was wrong," she said, her voice breaking. "But we didn't have a choice. Things were complicated." Mark stepped in. "We came to say we're sorry, Mrs. Latham, and to ask if there's any way you could help us get back on our feet. Just a small loan to start again." I looked at him, my expression calm, my voice steady. "You think I have money?" He blinked. "Well, the house, the accounts, your husband's inheritance." I leaned forward. "The house and accounts you forced me to give up, you mean? The ones you thought you'd stolen?" Claire swallowed hard. "Mom, please, do you know why your father left you the house and the money?" I interrupted. "It wasn't because he loved you more. It was because he wanted to test you, to see if you would take care of me when he was gone. You failed, Claire." Her lips trembled. What do you mean?" I smiled faintly. "Everything your father owned, every dollar, every property, he left it in a trust. A trust that could only be accessed by someone who proved loyalty and compassion toward me." Mark's face went pale. "So, the money was never yours," I said sharply. "And now it never will be." Claire looked like she'd been struck. "Mom, please. We were desperate. You don't understand?" "Oh, I understand perfectly," I said. "You left me here to die because you were too proud to care. But now you come crawling back because you've lost everything." Tears filled her eyes. "Mom, I'm sorry. I'll do anything to make it right." I looked at her for a long moment. Then I said softly, "Maybe this time it's my turn to teach you a lesson." Her eyes widened, but before she could speak, I handed her an envelope. "Open this tomorrow," I said. She stared at it, confused, then looked at me. "What is this?" "Your final test," I said quietly. The next morning, I knew she would open it. I imagined Claire sitting at her fancy dining table, hands trembling as she tore open the envelope I'd given her. Inside was a single handwritten letter, my final message to her, written weeks before she came back. In the letter, I began simply, "Dear Claire, if you're reading this, it means you finally remembered the woman who raised you, not for what she had, but for what she gave. You see, your father and I never cared about money. We cared about you, but love means nothing to those blinded by greed." Then in the next lines, I revealed the truth that would turn her world upside down. The $1 million inheritance your father left behind was never gone. It was placed in a second trust, one with two possible outcomes. If you abandoned me or treated me cruelly, the money would go entirely to charity. But if you ever found the courage to return, not for wealth, but for forgiveness, I would have the power to decide your future. I ended the letter with a choice. If you truly regret what you did, come back to the nursing home tomorrow morning. Not to ask for money, but to help serve breakfast to the residents. You'll find your answer there. The next morning, I sat in the cafeteria surrounded by my usual group of elderly friends. The nurses moved around serving trays of oatmeal and tea. I kept glancing at the door, wondering if Claire would come. For a long time, nothing happened. Then, just as I was about to lose hope, the door creaked open. There she was, my daughter, hair messy, eyes red, wearing jeans and a plain sweater. No jewelry, no husband, just a woman stripped of pride. Without saying a word, she walked over to the counter and picked up a tray. She began helping the staff, quietly, humbly, serving plates, pouring tea, and smiling faintly at the other residents. I watched her for a long while, tears stinging my eyes. It wasn't pity I felt. It was something deeper. Maybe forgiveness. When breakfast was over, she approached me slowly. "Mom," she said softly, "I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I want to earn it. I don't care about the money anymore. I just want my mother back." Her voice cracked at the last word. I studied her face, the same face I'd kissed goodnight 1,000 times when she was a little girl. And though my heart was heavy, I felt something lift inside me. I took her hand. "Claire," I said gently, "money can vanish. But the love between a mother and daughter, if it's real, never truly dies." She broke down crying, hugging me tightly, whispering apologies again and again. At that moment, I knew she had finally passed the test. The next day, I called my lawyer, Mr. Green, an old family friend who had helped Richard and me set up the trusts years ago. When he heard Claire was back, his voice carried both surprise and warmth. "She came back, didn't she?" he asked. "Yes," I said softly. "And this time not for the money." He chuckled. "Richard would have been proud of you both. Shall I prepare the final documents?" "Yes," I replied. "It's time." That afternoon, Mr. Green arrived at the nursing home. He had a briefcase full of papers and a knowing smile. Claire sat beside me, nervous but calm. She didn't ask what was happening. Maybe she didn't dare to hope. Mr. Green began. "Before your father passed, he left a clause in his will, a final instruction. He wanted this letter to be read only when you, Claire, showed signs of true remorse and compassion." Claire blinked, whispering, "He knew this would happen?" "He hoped it would," I said quietly. Mr. Green unfolded the letter and began to read. "My dearest Claire, if you're hearing these words, it means you've rediscovered the heart your mother and I always believed in. We built everything not for wealth but for love. And the love you show your mother now proves that part of you never truly died. I want you to understand something. True fortune isn't measured in money or houses. It's measured in forgiveness, compassion, and time spent with those who love you unconditionally. That's the legacy I wanted to leave behind." Claire's eyes filled with tears as she covered her mouth. Mr. Green continued, "Now, the trust will be released, but not in the way you expect." Claire looked up confused. He smiled gently. "Half of your father's inheritance and the full $1 million has been invested in this nursing home. It will now carry his name and fund care for abandoned elders." Claire gasped. "What? The whole $1 million?" I nodded slowly. That was his dream. To help those who were forgotten, just like I was. Mr. Green smiled again. "The rest, Mrs. Latham, is yours. To do with as you please." Claire turned to me, eyes wide. "Mom, no. That money should be yours." I shook my head. "It already is. But I want you to decide what to do with it." She hesitated, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Then, I want to use it to build a home. Not for me, for you, for us. So we can start over." For a moment, the room was silent. Even Mr. Green's eyes shimmered. I took her hand, my voice trembling. "You've finally learned the lesson, my dear. And now, you've earned your father's blessing." Outside, sunlight streamed through the window, golden and warm, like Richard's quiet smile from heaven. For the first time in years, I felt peace. Weeks passed, and for the first time in years, my days were filled with laughter instead of loneliness. Claire visited the nursing home every day, not out of guilt anymore, but out of love. She talked with the other residents, brought flowers, even helped redecorate the halls. Everyone adored her. though few knew our full story. One afternoon as we sat together in the garden, she turned to me and said, "Mom, I've started the construction. The home will be built right next to this one, a place where no parent ever feels abandoned again. I'm naming it the Latham House of Love." My heart swelled with pride. For so long, I had believed my daughter's soul was lost to greed and selfishness. But now, she had found something more valuable than any inheritance: her humanity. A few days later, I received a letter in the mail. It was from the bank that had once handled Richard's estate. Inside was a small note from Mr. Green. "Mrs. Latham, this was discovered in your husband's private safe. He asked me to deliver it to you when you felt whole again." I opened the envelope, hands trembling. Inside was a folded piece of paper and a photograph, a picture of the three of us, smiling on Claire's wedding day. Beneath it, Richard had written, "My dearest Emily, if you're reading this, it means you've forgiven her, and yourself. You always said love was our greatest treasure. I've left you something small in the cabin, one last secret just for you. Love, Richard." My eyes filled with tears. That night, I asked Claire to drive me to the old cabin, the same one I once hated, the same one I had called tiny and useless. When we arrived, the moonlight fell gently on its wooden walls, and I realized it wasn't so small after all. It was peaceful, filled with memories of simpler times. Inside, I searched quietly, and under a loose floorboard, I found a small wooden box. Inside were three things: a locket with our family picture, a handwritten note, and a key. The note said, "This key opens the safe in the cabin's back room. Inside lies what truly matters, not money, but your future." When I opened the safe, I gasped. It wasn't cash or gold. It was the deed to the newly purchased land next to the nursing home. Richard had already planned it, years before his death. The home Claire wanted to build was already his dream, too. I broke down crying, clutching the papers to my chest. "He knew," I whispered. "He knew this would happen someday." Claire hugged me tightly. "He never stopped believing in us. Mom, he just waited for us to believe in each other again." That night, as I lay in bed, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace. Not because of the money, not because of revenge, but because love had finally won. And though karma had done its work, forgiveness had the final word. Thank you for listening to my story. This was not just about betrayal or money. It was about love, redemption, and the strength a mother carries, even when her heart is broken. If you're watching this, remember, never forget those who raised you, because someday life will test your heart too. And please, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe to Tales by Granny for more true stories that touch the heart.